They didn't even save me a seat. I stood in the back of the packed conference hall, clutching a lukewarm paper cup of coffee like it was the only thing tethering me to the floor. Everyone else, rows and rows of former coworkers, investors, family friends, sat shoulder to shoulder, their eyes fixed on the front stage, where a slideshow of my father's career achievements played to the rhythm of polite applause. Laughter echoed now and then when a picture from the '80s popped up. A younger version of him, full head of hair, hand on someone's shoulder. Usually mine. But you wouldn't know that from where I stood. You wouldn't even know I existed. My name's Edward. I'm 33. And despite being the eldest son of Harold Dennison, founder of Dennison Industrial Solutions, I was essentially erased from the guest list at his own retirement event. The same man who once shook my tiny hand at a take-your-kid-to-work day and said, "One day this'll all be yours, champ," now gave my seat to my brother Nathan, who was currently on stage, wearing my old tailored navy blue suit, telling a story that happened to me like it was his own. And that was the first time I learned what it meant to take initiative. Nathan was saying, teeth shining, eyes scanning the audience with that smug, exaggerated sincerity only politicians and my little brother can pull off. I stayed up all night fixing the prototype myself. No shortcuts, no excuses. Just grit. Grit my ass. That prototype he was talking about, that was me, hunched over a dusty workbench in the warehouse at 2 a.m., fingers blackened from solder and oil, because Nathan accidentally took credit for a design improvement that nearly doubled production efficiency and nearly got me fired when it went wrong. Dad let him explain it away as a miscommunication. I didn't argue. Back then, I still thought staying quiet was the best way to keep the peace. Or maybe I was too used to the sound of my own voice being ignored. My mother was sitting in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a tissue like Nathan was giving a eulogy instead of a speech. She looked so proud. My father sat next to her, hands clasped, nodding in rhythm with Nathan's words. I scanned the name tags on the reserved chairs. There it was, Edward Dennison, right between my cousin Avery and one of Dad's old engineering buddies, crossed out in thick black marker, replaced with Nathan Dennison. I wasn't even surprised. Truth is, this retirement event was just the latest chapter in a long, slow process of being phased out of my own family. It wasn't always like this. I used to be the golden child, or at least the functional one. Straight A's, double major, ran the student engineering club in college, graduated with job offers. I came back home to help with the family company because I believed in it. I believed in him. Dad taught me everything about the business, supply chains, systems engineering, even how to negotiate with a supplier over bad parts without burning the bridge. But then Nathan came back from college. Barely scraped through with a business degree, he got more from charm than competence. Suddenly, Dad's eyes lit up around him. He started bringing Nathan to meetings. Let him pitch ideas. I was told to give your brother some room to grow. And before long, those ideas started looking an awful lot like mine. At first, I thought it was just favoritism. You know, older sibling resentment, standard stuff. But it wasn't just that. There was this unspoken narrative that began to form, right in front of my eyes, and I wasn't allowed to question it. Nathan was the visionary, the self-made heir. I was the one who should have done more, should have spoken up, should have been more assertive. Except every time I was assertive, I got called difficult, emotional, too sensitive. Like when I confronted Nathan about stealing my presentation deck and rebranding it as his latest pitch. He just laughed and said, "We're a team, man. Who cares whose idea it was?" Dad overheard the conversation and told me to let it go. Said, "You'll get your recognition in time." That was 4 years ago. 2 years after that, I was quietly moved to a smaller office. A year later, I was given a special project that conveniently kept me off the executive team meetings. And 6 months after that, I stopped being copied on important emails altogether. I became a ghost in the building I helped modernize. So I left. Quietly. No announcement. No farewell lunch. Just packed up my things and handed in a resignation letter that might as well have been written in disappearing ink. Dad didn't call. Mom texted a thumbs-up emoji. Nathan posted a photo on LinkedIn the next day with the caption, "Big shoes to fill. Challenge accepted." And that was it. Until 2 weeks ago, when I got a certified letter in the mail. It was from the legal team at Dennison Industrial Solutions. Not a lawsuit, nothing hostile. Just a formal notice of shareholder restructuring. A polite reminder that, As the holder of Class B voting shares through a trust left by my grandfather, I still had board-level rights in the company. And that due to recent buyouts and dilution of other stakeholders, my shares now made me the largest single voting party. The majority. I stared at that letter for a long time. Then I called my lawyer. Then I made a few calls. Quietly. Like always. So, when the company invited all board-level stakeholders and family members to Harold Dennison's retirement celebration, I RSVP'd yes. I even submitted my name for a reserved seat, just to see what they'd do. And now I had my answer. Nathan was wrapping up his speech, full of heartfelt lines about legacy, innovation, and how much Dad mentored him. The crowd clapped again, some genuinely, some out of politeness. I stayed in the shadows, watching it all unfold. Watching the legacy that was mine handed off like a relay baton to the brother who'd always been better at running in place than building the track. Then I noticed the CEO step toward the mic. He was new, brought in a year after I left. Didn't know him personally, but he'd reached out after the restructuring letter came in. Polite, curious, thorough. And as he raised the mic and smiled out at the crowd, I felt it. That shift in the room. That stillness. That prelude to something no one was expecting. As we celebrate Mr. Dennison's incredible career, the CEO began, his voice calm and even. It's only fitting that we also look toward the future of Dennison Industrial Solutions. With great pride, I'd like to introduce our newest majority shareholder. He paused, then turned, and pointed, straight at me. Heads swiveled like dominoes. My mother gasped. My cousin dropped her champagne flute. Nathan froze, the mic still in his hand, his mouth slightly open like he was waiting for a cue that never came. And my father? He just stared. I stepped forward, setting my coffee cup down on a side table. The aisle cleared like a path through fog. Every step echoed like a heartbeat. I reached the stage, took the mic gently from Nathan's stunned fingers. I smiled and said, "Don't worry. I won't stay long. Just came to collect what you built on my silence." They didn't speak to me after that night. Not a word. No, we didn't know. No, why didn't you tell us? Not even a petty remark about me making a scene. Nothing. Just silence. And that was almost worse than the years of subtle digs and casual dismissals. My phone stayed dry for days after the retirement event. I half expected my mother to send a text, something vague and frosty, like, "You really caught your father off guard." But even that didn't come. Nathan, unsurprisingly, went radio silent. And my father, the man whose name was on the company, the man who used to rest his hand on my shoulder at family barbecues and say, "One day you'll take this further than I ever could," didn't even try to pretend I existed. It was funny, in a hollow sort of way, because they'd spent so long pretending I was invisible, and now that I had the power they never thought I'd use, they still acted like I wasn't there. Like if they just ignored me long enough, I'd disappear again. But I wasn't going anywhere. After the event, I met with the CEO privately. His name was Callum, mid-40s, sharp, the kind of guy who didn't waste words. He didn't seem particularly loyal to my father or my brother. He was brought in during a restructuring phase after a few board members retired and one scandal involving misuse of company travel funds. I wasn't surprised to find Nathan's name buried in those audit reports, though it never went public. Callum seemed cautious around me at first. I guess he expected me to be vindictive, like I'd walk in swinging a wrecking ball. But I didn't want chaos. I just wanted clarity. And the truth. So I started asking questions. Why was I cut out of every decision after Nathan returned? Who approved the new product line that bled funds for 18 straight months? Why did the internal HR log show a voluntary resignation on my personnel file when I never marked it that way? It didn't take long to unravel the pattern. Nathan had been feeding the board a narrative since day one. I was burned out. I'd lost interest. I didn't have the hunger to lead. He presented himself as the steady hand, the eager heir, while I was painted as the bitter recluse who'd stepped away. And Dad, he let it happen. No, he helped it happen. Emails, notes, board meeting summaries, they all told the same story. Every time I tried to speak up, it was rebranded as internal disagreement. Every warning I gave about Nathan's bloated marketing budget or his risky client acquisitions was flagged as creative friction. I wasn't just pushed out. I was erased. I wish I could say that was the moment I snapped. That reading those emails ignited something righteous in me, and I marched back to the family estate with fire in my eyes. But it didn't happen like that. Instead, I sat in the parking lot outside the office I helped design, glass walls, exposed steel beams, a touch of industrial grit, and stared at the front doors. I watched as people walked in and out. People who used to call me boss. People who probably thought I'd vanished. And I thought about my father's face when the CEO pointed to me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shame. It was disbelief. Like he genuinely couldn't process the idea that I'd return, that I'd matter. And that's when the real breaking point began. Because it wasn't about revenge anymore. Not just that. It was about reclaiming what I let them take. Not the company. Not the title. Me. A few weeks later, I received an invitation. It was embossed, thick paper, the kind my mother liked to use for special occasions. A retirement dinner. Smaller, more intimate. Hosted at the family estate. Just family, close friends, and key company figures. There was no RSVP card. No line that said, "We'd love to see you." Just a time. A date. An address I knew too well. I almost didn't go. But then I thought, if this was their way of sweeping everything under the rug, of resetting the narrative again, I wasn't going to give them that luxury. So I showed up. I wore a dark suit. Not the old navy one Nathan had paraded around in. He could keep that hand-me-down like a costume. I came in something tailored, clean, modern. No tie. Just confidence. The house hadn't changed. Still sat like a monument on the hill, with its sweeping drive and tasteful landscaping and wraparound porch. I used to ride my bike around that circular drive as a kid while Dad waved from the study window. Now, as I stepped inside, the laughter and clinking of cutlery fell silent for a second, just long enough for the air to thicken. Nathan spotted me first. He blinked, smiled, then said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Well, look who showed up. Didn't think you'd want to be seen after, after becoming majority shareholder?" I asked calmly, brushing past him. His jaw clenched. Right. That. The living room had been converted into a banquet space. Long tables, catered dishes, twinkling string lights strung across the ceiling. The scent of roasted lamb and saffron rice filled the air. I saw our old neighbors, Dad's former assistant, a few investors. And at the far end of the table sat my parents. My mother looked thinner. She'd always been proud, always dressed like someone going to brunch at a country club. Tonight, she wore a soft blue dress and pearl earrings. She didn't stand when I approached. Neither did my father. "Edward," he said, like the name tasted unfamiliar. "Dad," I nodded. "Mom." My mother smiled tightly. "We weren't sure you'd come." I wasn't sure either. There was a pause. Then my father gestured toward an open seat. Not next to them. Not even close. Down the table, near the edge. Sandwiched between a junior exec and an old friend of my grandfather's who probably didn't know what decade it was. I didn't move. Instead, I leaned in slightly and asked, "Did you get my proposal?" Dad blinked. "What proposal?" Of course he hadn't read it. "Callum forwarded it to you last week," I said. "It outlines a restructuring of the executive leadership, splitting the role of president and CEO. Standard stuff. Helps stabilize leadership transitions." My father's brow furrowed. "We don't need a restructuring. You're retiring." "Nathan's not ready." "The board agrees." Nathan, who had been hovering nearby like a shark in a suit, stepped in. "Excuse me? I've led 3 successful, 2 of which hemorrhaged money." I cut in, my voice still calm. "And one of which was quietly folded into an R&D holding to avoid embarrassment." My mother's lips tightened. "Edward, this is neither the time nor the place." "I disagree," I said, finally turning to face them fully. "I think this is exactly the time. Because every person in this room is part of the myth you've built. And they deserve to know who they're celebrating." Nathan's smile wavered. "You really think you're better than us now? Just because some trust fund made you majority shareholder?" "I think I stopped being less the moment I walked away," I replied. "And I think deep down, you know that's what scares you." My father stood slowly. He was older now, lines on his face deeper, hair thinner. But his voice still had that same measured weight. "You came here to embarrass us?" "No," I said. "I came here to offer a deal." That got everyone's attention. "The proposal stands. Restructure leadership. Let Callum continue as CEO. Let Nathan keep his role in marketing, under oversight. I'll stay on as chairman. Hands off, mostly. I won't interfere unless something goes wrong." "And if we refuse?" Dad asked, voice cold. "Then I pull funding for the expansion in Dallas. And the retooling in Detroit. And the new vertical integration pipeline Nathan keeps promising but hasn't sourced suppliers for. He stared at me. You wouldn't. I met his eyes. Try me. And that was when it happened. The moment I didn't see coming. The moment that cracked something in me I didn't even know was still intact. Because my mother, stood up and said, "You always were ungrateful, Edward." Just like that. No hesitation. No flicker of conflict in her voice. Like it had been rehearsed. Practiced. Ready. You were handed everything, she continued, her voice rising just enough for the room to fall still. Your grandfather left you those shares because he felt sorry for you. Not because you earned them. You always thought you were better than this family, quietly judging, always keeping score. And now you want to waltz in and control us. I stared at her. She wasn't angry. She was disappointed. And somehow that hurt more. I gave up 10 years of my life to this company, I said softly. 10 years of showing up, staying late, fixing what others broke. I got no recognition. No thanks. Not even a goodbye. And still, I tried to be respectful. I gave you a chance to fix it quietly. Nathan scoffed. You mean blackmail? No, I said, straightening. I mean grace. And then I left. I walked out of the room, out of the house, past the rows of parked cars and the gold-plated gate. I didn't look back, but I knew that something had shifted. I didn't cry on the drive home. Not at first. I kept the windows down, letting the cold night air hit my face like a slap I was too proud to dodge. Mai Tai sat in the passenger seat, coiled like a snake. The silence in the car was heavy, pressing against my chest, louder than any argument or accusation. I told myself I was fine, that this wasn't new, that I'd lived through worse. But as I pulled into the underground garage of my apartment building, parked in my spot, and stared at the concrete wall in front of me, it hit. Slow at first, then all at once. The betrayal in her voice. The sheer ease with which my mother cut me down in front of a room full of people. Like she'd just been waiting for the right moment to say it. You always were ungrateful, Edward. The words repeated themselves like static. I sat in the car with the engine off and my fists clenched in my lap. And when the tears finally came, they weren't loud or violent. Just quiet. Controlled. Like everything else in my life. Even my grief came with a measured pause. I hadn't realized how badly I wanted her to defend me. To say, "That's enough, Nathan." Or to at least look surprised. But she wasn't. And that hurt in a way no business betrayal ever could. That was my bottom. Not losing the company. Not being erased from a legacy I helped build. Not even being humiliated at a dinner table full of strangers. It was realizing that I had never really had a place there to begin with. And that's what saved me. Because once you stop trying to earn love that was never yours to win, you're free to build something else. Something better. It started small. I stopped checking my email every morning like a reflex. I shut off the group text that included my parents and brother, the one that always buzzed with family updates I was barely a footnote in. I cleared my calendar of anything I didn't want to do. I canceled the subscription box Mom signed me up for last Christmas without asking. Then I reached out to people who had seen me. Derek, my old college roommate, who ran a boutique consulting firm and used to say, "Man, you've got CEO energy. You just need your own playground." Ria, a former colleague who left Denison 2 years ago after Nathan cut her department's funding mid-quarter and blamed her for the collapse. She'd started something of her own since then. Scrappy, ambitious. I'd always admired that. I invited them to coffee. No agenda, just conversation. And those conversations turned into plans. Plans turned into outlines. Outlines into blueprints. And suddenly, I was building again. It wasn't flashy at first. We didn't even have a name for the company. Just a shared Google Drive folder and a Slack channel named The Do-Over. It made me laugh every time I saw the icon. But the ideas came fast. Denison had always been stuck in legacy systems, heavy industry, old contracts, outdated manufacturing workflows. But the future was modular, agile, smarter. We talked about creating a platform, hardware-software hybrid solutions for small-scale manufacturers looking to optimize without billion-dollar budgets. The kind of innovation Denison had refused to pursue because Dad thought smaller clients meant smaller respect. We saw an opening, and we took it. Ria tapped into her network in Detroit and Cleveland. Derek brought in a dev team out of Austin who were hungry and didn't care that we weren't some fancy brand yet. I funded the first 6 months out of pocket, pulling dividends from my trust and liquidating some safe stocks I'd been sitting on for years. It felt reckless, terrifying, and I loved it. Because for the first time in years, every decision had weight. Every call, every risk, every late-night Slack message wasn't about proving myself to a father who'd already made up his mind. It was about building. Not for legacy, not for approval, just for me. There were setbacks, of course. There always are. One of our prototype units overheated during a client demo and nearly torched an entire warehouse. A supplier ghosted us mid-production. I had to rewrite a 60-page investor deck 3 days before a pitch meeting after realizing our numbers were off by nearly 15%. But every time we stumbled, we stood back up. Smarter, leaner, closer. And people noticed. A mid-tier trade magazine ran a piece on us titled The Ghost of Dennison Returns. I didn't love the name, but I understood the appeal. The narrative wrote itself. Discarded heir turns underdog innovator. Investors started calling. Some discreetly, some less so. A venture firm out of Chicago offered seed funding with a decent valuation. We turned them down. Too eager. Too many strings. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was from Marcus Stone, a name I hadn't heard in over a decade. He was one of Dad's oldest competitors. Used to run a rival firm until it collapsed in the late 2000s during a brutal acquisition war. I remember my father laughing at him once over dinner, saying, Stone was always too sentimental to survive. But now here he was, calling me. He said he'd been following the news, that he admired what we were trying to do, and that he wanted in, not as an investor, but as a mentor. I spent too many years fighting against men like your father, he said. It's time someone rewrote the rulebook. And I think that someone's you. I didn't answer right away, not because I was unsure, but because I realized for the first time, I believed him. So we brought him on. And with him came connections, clients, legitimacy. His name opened doors we hadn't even known existed. Meanwhile, word of our rise was starting to ripple. I could feel it in subtle ways. A friend of a friend told me Nathan had tried to pitch a modular optimization initiative to the Dennison board and been politely laughed out of the room. Apparently, someone had already cornered that space. I smiled when I heard that, but I didn't gloat, because the truth was, I didn't need them to fail anymore. I was too busy winning. Our little do-over wasn't so little anymore. We rebranded, got our own office space in a converted factory loft, and launched a pilot program with a manufacturing co-op in Pennsylvania. By the end of Q2, we'd turned a modest profit. By Q3, we were profitable and growing. And through it all, I didn't reach out to my family once. Not for holidays. Not for birthdays. Not even when Mom sent a carefully worded email in late spring that simply said, "Hope you're doing well. Your father misses you." I didn't reply, because by then, I understood something that had taken me 33 years to learn. Their love came with terms. Mine didn't. And I wasn't going to keep showing up to a table where I was only welcome if I stayed quiet. Still, I knew the next chapter was coming. Because power vacuums don't stay empty for long. And Dennison Industrial Solutions, despite all its polished steel and legacy prestige, was rotting beneath the surface. The board was restless. Investors were skittish. And Nathan, despite the speeches and the charm, was starting to crumble under pressure. All it would take was one more push. It started with an invitation I was never meant to see. Technically, it wasn't even addressed to me. It was forwarded by accident. Some overworked intern at a consulting firm hit the wrong Edward in the CC field. That's how I found out that Dennison Industrial Solutions had scheduled a high-level strategic partnership summit for mid-October. Hosted in Chicago. Closed door. Attendees included board members, investors, and, of course, Nathan, who was billed on the internal deck as Chief Vision Officer. Vision. That was rich. The only vision he had was the kind that looked good on paper and tanked in practice. The goal of the summit was clear: reposition Dennison as a future-focused powerhouse in industrial tech. Nathan's pet project, codenamed Horizon Grid, was their golden pitch. A suite of cloud-connected factory management tools built on outdated architecture, inflated licensing models, and laughably vague performance metrics. I recognized it immediately. It was a Frankenstein copy of something we had already built 6 months ago, minus all the things that made ours work. They were trying to beat me to market, with my own playbook. And for the first time in months, I felt something hot and familiar stir inside me. Not bitterness. Not hurt. Resolve. Because this wasn't just about family anymore. This was business. And if they wanted to play in my sandbox, then it was time they realized I'd built a fortress while they were still scribbling in the dirt. I called Derek and Riyadh that night. We met at our office after hours, lights low, laptops glowing. Marcus joined over video from LA, leaning back in his chair with that wolfish smile he wore whenever someone pissed him off. I laid out everything. Nathan's summit, the Horizon Grid platform, the timing. Riyadh skimmed the slides, brows furrowed. They're planning to launch within 3 months. Less, I said, which means they're going to announce it at the summit. They want to drum up interest before they have a working prototype. Marcus shook his head. Classic bluff. They're hoping to bait investors, then scramble to deliver before the money dries up. Derek leaned forward. So what's the play? I hesitated. Because the plan I had in mind wasn't just tactical. It was personal. They don't know we have clients yet, I said. They've heard rumors, maybe seen press blurbs. But they don't know who we're working with. Riyadh's eyes lit up. You're thinking we go public. Not just that, I said. We launch before them. Full demo. Live testimonials. Case studies. Show the world we're already doing what they're promising. And doing it better. Derek tapped his fingers on the table. We'd need everything ready. Marketing, press, deployment, client sign-offs. Give me 4 weeks, I said. You get the product sharp. I'll handle the rest. And just like that, the setup began. I started by calling in every favor I'd ever earned. Quietly. No flashy moves. Just careful, deliberate planning. I reached out to Louisa Tran, a journalist who'd covered the tech sector for years and owed me one from the old days, back when I anonymously leaked a story about a supplier's illegal dumping practices that saved her career and buried a toxic contract my father refused to cancel. I sent her everything. Detailed specs, client results, before and after photos from a textile plant in Ohio that doubled its output using our system. She read it all and said, if even half of this checks out, it's front page. Then I called Alan. Alan was an ex-board member from Denison who left during the restructuring years ago. He'd always liked me. Said I reminded him of himself before the mergers made me soft. He was old, well-connected, and surprisingly petty. When I told him what Nathan was planning, he just laughed and said, about time someone shut that little con man up. He agreed to attend the summit. Not as a mole, as a mirror. Someone who could quietly reflect what Denison had become to the people too close to see it. I also reached out to our pilot clients, small to mid-sized manufacturers across 3 states who'd been testing our system for months. I asked for permission to feature them in a launch video. Not a sales pitch, just the truth. Every single one said yes. Some even offered to go on camera. We've had 6 different software reps in the last 10 years, one guy told me. You're the only one who picked up the phone at 11 p.m. on a Sunday when our node fried. I'll vouch for you any day. And then, there was the venue. If Denison was hosting their summit in Chicago, I wanted to be seen in Chicago. So I booked a gallery space 2 blocks from their hotel. Minimalist. Industrial. Open floor plan. The kind of place where you could project your brand on the wall and have it feel like something. We called it Build Forward. Not a launch party. Not a product reveal. An experience. Interactive stations. Live product demos. A timeline wall showing our progress. A short documentary-style video playing on loop with clips of our clients, our team, our late nights. Honest moments. Real people. No flash. Just facts. And most importantly, no names. Not mine. Not Denison's. Just us. The team worked around the clock. Riyadh oversaw the rollout logistics with surgical precision. Derek rebuilt the backend to handle a full live demo under load. Marcus reached out to a few quiet investors, letting them know, without fanfare, that something was coming. Something real. And I wrote a speech. Just in case. Because part of me knew that no matter how clean I played this, my family wouldn't stay silent forever. And I was right. 3 days before the summit, I got a voicemail from my father. Edward, we need to talk. Just that. No apology. No context. I didn't call back. The next day, I got a cease and desist from Denison's legal team claiming we were infringing on proprietary design elements. They cited vague similarities between our UI layout and one of Nathan's pitch decks from 2 years ago. It was nonsense. And they knew it. But it told me they were scared. Then came the article. Louisa ran it 2 days before the summit. The Factory Revolution. How a scrappy team quietly outpaced industry giants. It hit all the right notes. Innovation, integrity, actual results. Nathan's name wasn't mentioned, but everyone in the industry knew exactly who we were outpacing. That morning, my phone blew up. LinkedIn, email, messages from former colleagues who thought I'd vanished. One read, "Oh my God, you did it. Can I invest?" I didn't reply, because it wasn't time to celebrate yet. The real moment, the setup, was still coming. And when it did, I wanted everyone to be watching. The morning of the summit, I dressed with care. No suit, just dark slacks, a clean white shirt, and a navy vest with no logo. Understated, neutral, professional. I arrived at the gallery space an hour before the doors opened. The team was already there, buzzing, excited, nervous. The setup looked perfect. Screens flickering to life. Coffee brewing in the corner. Light glinting off brushed steel hardware. It felt alive. And then, as I adjusted the lighting on the timeline wall, my phone buzzed again. Another message. From Nathan. Saw the article. Cute. Let's talk before you embarrass yourself. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I deleted it. Because this wasn't about him anymore. It never really was. This was about building something no one could take from me. And I was almost ready. The summit started like any other. Polished suits. Polite handshakes. Pastries no one actually ate. The conference room inside the Marquette Plaza Hotel in Chicago was outfitted with soft lighting, cream-colored walls, and rows of seats arranged like pews facing the corporate altar. A glossy Denison Industrial Solutions banner hung behind the podium. I didn't attend, of course. I didn't need to. That morning, I walked 2 blocks away to the gallery we'd booked for Build Forward. The space hummed with quiet energy. Ria was reviewing cue cards with one of our client speakers. Derek was running final tests on the live demos. Marcus sat in the back, sipping espresso and watching everything unfold like he'd seen this play out a dozen times before. "Today's the day," he said, nodding to me. "It is," I said, "and not just for us." At 9 a.m. sharp, Build Forward opened its doors. By 9:17, we were at capacity. By 9:45, the first tweet hit tech Twitter. Not at the Denison Summit, but just walked into something called #BuildForward 2 blocks away, and it's electric. These people aren't pitching dreams, they're showing results. The photos showed our timeline wall, the textile plant CEO demoing his upgraded dashboard, a rotating infographic of our latest numbers. By 10:10, more attendees from the Denison Summit began trickling into our space. Not all at once. Quietly. A few at a time. Curious. Restless. Someone told someone else about a competitor's launch happening down the street. Another exec got bored of Nathan's slideshow and decided to see what the fuss was about. And then it spread. A buzz. A whisper. By 11:30 a.m., Denison's summit room was half empty. Nathan didn't take it well. I wasn't there to see it. But Marcus's contact inside the event later told me Nathan paused his presentation mid-slide to ask, "Can someone explain why people keep leaving?" That was the beginning of his unraveling. Because what Nathan had been selling, what he'd staked his name on, was a future that didn't exist yet. A hypothetical platform built on borrowed buzzwords. A promise without substance. What we offered was now. Live product. Real clients. Testimonials from companies who spoke plainly. We cut downtime by 40%. Our order processing is faster than ever. I stopped getting Sunday night breakdown calls. By noon, Build Forward was trending on LinkedIn. A CNBC reporter showed up unannounced. Louisa messaged me. "Wall Street Journal wants to run a feature. You in?" I wasn't even done walking the demo floor when I got the call from Denison's board liaison. Her voice was tight, controlled. "Edward, we'd like to speak with you privately. Today, if possible." I said I was busy, but I'd be in touch. I hung up, looked at the crowd around me, clients, investors, engineers, press, and knew I didn't need them anymore. They needed me. Still, I waited. Not out of spite. Out of patience. 3 days later, Denison stock took a sharp dip after a leak confirmed Horizon Grid was still in pre-alpha and wouldn't ship for another 9 months. Investors who'd been promised a Q4 rollout demanded answers. One firm pulled funding entirely. The board called an emergency meeting. And that's when I made my move. I submitted a formal proposal to the board to acquire several of Denison's key manufacturing software divisions, the same ones Nathan had tried to pivot into Horizon Grid. Our offer was fair, above market value, and backed by clean capital. No games. No drama. Just business. The offer came with two conditions. Nathan steps down permanently from all leadership roles. Harold Dennison relinquishes his seat as honorary board chair. For 5 days, they said nothing. Then, late on a Friday evening, I got the call. They accepted. The acquisition made headlines the following Monday. Startup led by former Dennison heir acquires key divisions in bold power play. Nathan didn't release a statement, but he didn't have to, because just hours later, an internal video leaked from the summit. In it, Nathan is seen pacing backstage, red-faced, shouting into his phone. "I'm not going to sit there while he makes me look like a joke." This was supposed to be my moment. I watched it once, then closed the tab. A week after the deal closed, I visited the old Dennison office building. I didn't need to. My lawyers were handling the transition, but I wanted to see it one last time. The receptionist looked up at me, her eyes going wide. "Mr. Dennison, Mr. Edward." "It's all right," I said, "just passing through." I walked the halls like a ghost revisiting the house that once buried him. The walls were the same. The lighting, the smell of coffee from the break room. But it didn't feel like mine anymore. Because it wasn't. Not really. I stopped outside my father's old office. The door was open. Empty inside. Bare shelves. Desk cleared. I stepped in and looked around. Then sat in the chair behind the desk. The leather creaked softly. I waited for something to hit me. Anger, sadness, vindication. But all I felt was peace. Because this wasn't the revenge. The press coverage. The acquisition. The stock drop. Nathan's tantrum. My father's silence. That was just fallout. The real revenge was building something they couldn't take credit for. Was proving, without shouting, that I was never the disappointment. I was the foundation, and they just never looked down long enough to notice. The next morning, I woke up to a message from my mother. Just 2 words. "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long time, then turned off my phone and got ready for the day. I had a meeting with our new head of operations, then lunch with a potential client in Baltimore, and after that, a product roadmap to review. Because I wasn't just the majority shareholder anymore. I was building something real, something mine. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing anyone's approval. I was already ahead. They thought I'd stay quiet forever. Turns out, I was just waiting for my turn at the mic.